In the bustling city of New York, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and the streets hummed with endless activity, lived a young woman named Emily Carter. At just 25 years old, she had faced more hardships than most people twice her age. Orphaned as a teenager, Emily worked tirelessly as a waitress in various upscale venues to make ends meet, often juggling multiple shifts just to afford her tiny, rundown apartment in a sketchy neighborhood. Her days were a monotonous grind of serving entitled patrons who barely acknowledged her existence, tipping poorly despite their lavish lifestyles. Emily's uniform, a simple yellow blouse with a white apron, was stained from countless spills, a testament to her unrelenting labor. She dreamed of a better life, perhaps going back to school to study nursing, a passion sparked by helping her ailing grandmother before she passed. But dreams seemed distant when rent was due and bills piled up like autumn leaves. One fateful evening, Emily was assigned to cater a glamorous gala at the opulent Grand Palace Hotel, a venue reserved for the elite. The room was adorned with crystal chandeliers that sparkled like stars, heavy velvet curtains framing massive windows, and marble floors that echoed with the clinks of champagne glasses. Guests arrived in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, their conversations laced with talks of stocks, yachts, and exotic vacations. Emily moved gracefully through the crowd, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres, her braids neatly tied back to keep her blonde hair out of the way. Little did she know, this night would alter the course of her destiny forever. As she refilled glasses and cleared plates, she couldn't help but feel out of place among the wealth and glamour, yet she maintained her polite smile, hoping for generous tips to cover her next month's expenses. The air was thick with perfume and cigar smoke, and soft classical music played in the background, setting a sophisticated tone. Among the distinguished guests was Alexander Harrington, a renowned billionaire whose empire spanned tech innovations, real estate, and philanthropy. At 58, he was a self-made man who had risen from humble beginnings to command billions, but his health had been declining due to a hidden heart condition he ignored amid his busy schedule. Dressed in a sharp blue shirt that matched his piercing eyes, Alexander mingled with investors and socialites, his presence commanding respect. He was known for his sharp wit and generous donations, but few knew the loneliness that plagued him since his wife's passing years ago. No children or close family, just a vast fortune and an empty mansion. As the evening progressed, Alexander felt a sudden tightness in his chest, dismissing it as indigestion from the rich food. He continued chatting, but the pain intensified, spreading to his arm. Emily, stationed nearby, noticed him falter slightly while speaking to a group. She had taken a basic first aid course during her community college days, including CPR training, which she never thought she'd use. The gala was in full swing, with laughter echoing off the walls, when suddenly Alexander clutched his chest and collapsed to the floor, his body hitting the marble with a thud that silenced the room. Gasps filled the air as guests backed away in shock, some fumbling for their phones to call emergency services, but panic set in quickly. No one seemed to know what to do. The formally dressed crowd stood frozen, their elegance useless in the face of crisis. Emily, without hesitation, dropped her tray and rushed forward, her heart pounding as she knelt beside him. She checked for a pulse, faint, and breathing, none. Remembering her training, she positioned her hands on his chest, interlocking her fingers, and began compressions, pushing hard and fast to the rhythm of an imaginary beat. The room watched in stunned silence as this unassuming waitress took charge, her yellow uniform a stark contrast to the sea of black ties and gowns. Emily's mind raced as she performed CPR, counting compressions allowed to keep steady, 1, 2, 3, up to 30, then tilting his head back to give 2 rescue breaths, pinching his nose and sealing her mouth over his. The billionaire's face was pale, his lips turning blue, but she persisted, sweat beading on her forehead despite the air-conditioned hall. Guests murmured among themselves, some recording the scene on their phones, others whispering about who she was. A few men in suits finally stepped forward, but they hesitated, unsure how to assist. Emily shouted for someone to call 911 again, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. Minutes felt like hours as she continued the cycle, her arms aching but refusing to stop. She recalled her grandmother's heart attack, how she had felt helpless then, vowing never to be in that position again. Alexander's body jerked slightly with each compression, but there was no immediate response. The chandelier lights above seemed brighter, the curtains billowing slightly from a draft, adding to the surreal atmosphere. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Paramedics burst through the doors, equipped with defibrillators and oxygen masks, taking over from Emily. They shocked his heart once, twice, and on the third try, Alexander gasped, his eyes fluttering open as color returned to his face. The room erupted in relieved applause, but Emily stepped back, exhausted and trembling, her hands sore from the effort. She had saved a life, but in that moment, she was just glad he was breathing. As the paramedics stabilized Alexander and prepared to transport him to the hospital, he weakly turned his head, his gaze locking onto Emily. Who are you?" he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. She introduced herself humbly, explaining she was just a waitress who knew basic CPR. Alexander's eyes widened with gratitude. In his near-death haze, he saw not just a savior but a kindred spirit, someone who acted selflessly in a world full of opportunists. The guests buzzed around, praising her heroism, but Alexander insisted on speaking to her before leaving. "You saved my life," he said, grasping her hand weakly. "I won't forget this." Emily blushed, brushing it off as anyone would have done the same, but deep down, she felt a spark of hope. At the hospital, doctors confirmed he had suffered a massive heart attack, and without immediate intervention, he wouldn't have survived. Alexander, recovering in a private suite, couldn't stop thinking about the young woman in the yellow shirt. He instructed his assistant to find out everything about her, her background, her struggles. What he learned touched him, her orphan status, her dreams deferred by poverty. Meanwhile, Emily returned home that night to her cramped apartment, collapsing into bed with aching muscles, unaware that her act of kindness had caught the attention of a powerful man. Days turned into weeks as Alexander recuperated, his mind fixated on repaying Emily. He had built his fortune through hard work and innovation, but this experience humbled him, reminding him of life's fragility. Upon discharge, he contacted the hotel for her details and invited her to his mansion for a "thank you" meeting. Emily, nervous and dressed in her best thrift store outfit, arrived at the sprawling estate, awed by the manicured gardens and towering fountains. Alexander greeted her warmly, his blue shirt now casual, a far cry from the gala attire. Over tea in a sunlit parlor, he shared his story, his rise from poverty, similar to hers, and how her quick thinking mirrored the determination he valued. "I want to change your life," he declared. Emily was stunned when he offered to fund her education fully, setting up a scholarship in her name for nursing school. But that was just the beginning. He also provided her with a high-paying job at his company as a health coordinator, utilizing her first aid knowledge. Tears welled in her eyes as she accepted, overwhelmed by the generosity. For the first time, she saw a path out of poverty, a chance to pursue her passion without financial chains. Emily's new life began swiftly. Enrolled in a top nursing program, she excelled, her real-life experience giving her an edge over classmates. At work, she implemented wellness programs for Alexander's employees, reducing health risks and earning respect from colleagues. Alexander became a mentor, sharing business acumen and life lessons during weekly dinners. He introduced her to his network, opening doors she never imagined. Her apartment was replaced by a cozy condo he gifted her, insisting it was the least he could do. Emily's confidence grew, she no longer felt invisible. Friends and family, distant relatives she reconnected with, marveled at her transformation. But challenges arose. Jealous coworkers whispered about favoritism, and media caught wind of the story, dubbing her the hero waitress. Alexander shielded her from the spotlight, teaching her to navigate fame. Through it all, their bond deepened, evolving into a father-daughter-like relationship that filled voids in both their lives. As months passed, Alexander's health improved, thanks to Emily's encouragement for regular checkups and lifestyle changes. He revised his will, naming her a significant beneficiary, ensuring her future security. Emily, now a certified nurse, volunteered at local clinics, paying forward the kindness. One evening, at a company gala, ironically similar to the one where they met, Alexander publicly honored her, presenting a check for a charity in her name. The crowd cheered, and Emily, in an elegant dress, felt like she belonged. His reaction that fateful night had indeed changed everything. From rags to recognition, her life was forever altered. Yet, not all was smooth. Emily faced backlash from Alexander's distant relatives, who contested his decisions, accusing her of manipulation. Legal battles ensued, but Alexander's ironclad will and her genuine character prevailed. Through the ordeal, she learned resilience, standing tall amid scrutiny. Alexander's support was unwavering, and their friendship strengthened. She traveled with him on business trips, experiencing the world, Paris fashion shows, Tokyo tech expos, broadening her horizons. Years later, Emily graduated top of her class, opening her own clinic for underprivileged communities, funded by Alexander's foundation. He, proud as a father, attended the ribbon cutting, his eyes misty. Their story inspired books and movies, symbolizing hope and humanity. Emily married a kind doctor she met through work, starting a family in a home filled with love.